Hi everyone, this is Purna. Today I'm here to discuss about APIs, its use cases and how to use them in React. Let's understand what is API. An API stands for Application Programming Interface. It is a set of protocol, routes and tools that allow different software applications to communicate with each other. In simple terms, an API is a way for software applications to share data and the functionalities with another application. In a nutshell, it's what allows a user to receive data from a remote application without having direct access to the application itself. What is an API in layman terms? Imagine you are at a restaurant and you want to order food and you are the customer and you don't know how to cook. So you rely on the chef to prepare the food for you. However, you don't have direct access to the chef. Instead, you place the order with the waiter. So when you place your order with the waiter takes note of your request and communicate it to the chef in the kitchen. The chef prepares your food and give it to the waiter to bring back to you. The waiter acts as a bridge between you and chef, enabling you to get what you need without having to interact directly with the chef. Here, waiter acts as an API which receives the request from the customer and it collects the food from the chef by giving the order and respond it back to the customer with a response. How API works? APIs are used in wide range of applications, including web application, mobile apps, and other software systems. Here is how it works. A client sends a request to the server, usually in the form of HTTP request. The server receives the request and processes it through service, or we call that as business logic processing. It could collect data from the database. Then the server sends a response back to the client, usually in the form of an HTTP response. The client receives the response and processes it. Use cases of API. APIs can be used in varieties of use cases, including integrations between different applications. For example, an e-commerce website may use an API to integrate with a payment gateway. Accessing external data. API can be used to access data from external sources such as social media platform, weather forecasting, or stock prices. For creating microservices, API can be used to create microservices, which are small independent services that work together to create a larger applications. How to consume API in React? We can use library like Axios or Fetch in order to make HTTP requests to our API endpoint. This will allow us to receive the data we need for our application, and also we can send data to APIs. Here are a few examples how to fetch data using Fetch library or using Axios library. The first example you can see here, we are making an API call to JSON placeholder type code.com/users. This is the API endpoint. Basically, it keeps the fake data, and we are receiving that data and setting off with a state variable. Here we are using Fetch library. In the second example, we can see here we are using Axios library to fetch the data from the same API endpoint, and it gives a response, and after getting the response we are setting into the state variable. Or if there is any error, then we can catch that error here. Let's come to the VS Code. We'll consume some API endpoint and show the data in our browser. Here I have written some code. I have some dummy data, example data, and I am showing that data in a div. Basically, it's a card component that you can see in Bootstrap. So if you see the example data, it's a constant. So it has two objects. Basically, it contains list of post like user ID, title, and body. So if I save this, you can see the output like this, right? Test title 1, test title 2. This is in my browser. Yeah, here is one fake API endpoint. So basically it will give you some dummy data. So they have some resources like post, comments, album, photos to do the user. So I am going to use this post with this example. It has a good amount of records inside it. So let me get into the Postman and we'll see how the data looks like. By using Postman, we can test the API endpoints. Basically, we can see the response of a particular endpoint, whether it is get or post or any type of HTTP methods that we can pass the header, we can pass the JSON data in body, and we can also check the response, how it is coming. So here in this endpoint, basically it is retrieving all the list of posts from that JSON placeholder typecode.com. This is a fake API that we already know. So I will use this endpoint in my VS Code, in my React app, and we'll load this data into our component, and we can see that in browser. So let me create a function called fetchpost So in this functions, what I'm doing, I'm setting that loader as true, and I'm making API call using fetch function. This is the inbuilt functions that comes with React. So it takes a parameter called the URL of the endpoint. So here I'm passing the URL, right? You can see API host URL constant, and it has that exactly the same endpoint path what we were using in Postman. Okay, so this then is work like a success callback, and we are just returning the response.json. It's written as a response object, and in next callback, basically the JSON object that we are fetching, and I am storing this data into my state variable called post list. And once all things are done, then I am just setting this loader false. In case there is a error, it will come to this catch callback, and in this catch block I am setting the error along with the loader false. So let me call this function in use effect. So basically it works like a page load. So now refresh this, we can see all the post that we retrieve from the API is loaded to my page. So this is how we can fetch the data. Let me comment that out again. Again refresh. So again I can see my default data. So as we discussed in our previous slide that we will also use Axios. So that's a third-party library. Using this Axios library, your code become more cleaner and very easy to handle the request and response. So most of the people in industry are using those external library to manage their APIs. So let me write a function const fetch post with Axios okay, looks like I missed something. Okay, now my function is ready. So in this functions, what exactly I'm doing, right? So I'm using this Axios package. So how can you use this? Basically, you have to install npm install this Axios package, and then you have to import it. So once you get that object Axios, right? So you we can use get methods. As you saw in the Postman, right? So we fetch the data using get method. So we are basically retrieving the data here. So we are passing the URL in the get methods. It takes the URL as a parameter, and it responding back with a callback, the success callback basically. Then we are using response.data. We are returning. In this data we got already the JSON object, so we are saving that data into the postlet state, and we are stopping the loader false. And also in case of any error, so it will come to this catch block and it will set the error. Also here we are logging the error in the console and set loading false. So let me call this function here. Okay, so now see, yeah, so now we can get the data. So this is how we can use that Axios library to fetch the data from API using get method. The similar things we achieve through the fetch also. So now let me use one more method like axiospost. So for that, what we will do, right? So we will create a button for creating post, and we will create a post and will add into the list as well. So again, let me comment out this code, and let's see. Let's refresh this browser. We'll see the default data again. So what I will do here, right? So here I have created a button called create post, and it is calling a function called create post. So let me create a function with that name. Okay, so before writing that create functions, we just need to understand how the endpoint looks like, and let me go back to the Postman. So here you can see, right, create post. So this is also have the same endpoint what we used for the get, and in this post what we are doing, right, so we are passing a JSON object. Basically it's a post object, the new one which we are going to create, like title foo, body bar, and user ID 1 as a JSON object in body. And here one thing changed, this HTTP method. So earlier we were using get, so now here we are using post. But if you expand this drop down, you will see get, post, put, delete, and there are few more methods are there. Basically this get is used to retrieve the data, post is to insert the data, and put is basically used to update the data, and delete is used to delete the data. So these are some standard specifications that we can see. So based on the API spec, we have to implement it in our code. If you want to know more about other methods that here, so please explore. When I am requesting through this payload, right, so you can see it is returning back that particular post created recently, and here you will see the ID is 101. So let's go back to the Visual Studio Code and implement this function. So here you can see, right, so I have created that payload, and that payload I will pass with my post method. So here what exactly I am doing, so axios.post. So in my previous functions we have used get, and it takes the parameters for endpoint URL, and the next parameter is a payload. Okay, and also I am passing a header, and this header specify the content type, because I am sending a payload with the body, so I have to define what kind of data that I am passing. So it is like application JSON. So if you want to send some files or some other things, like let's say for file you have to use octet stream. So there are different header that we have to specify, and like the existing example, right, so it will also return a callback that in this, then it's a success callback basically. So here I got the response. In the response, the dot data, I will get the recently created object, and I am adding that into my previous post list. So currently it is holding the dummy data plus this new object that I created, and I am just setting that loader false. Like that, in case block, if something come, then it will add the error and it will also log in the console. Let me refresh this page. That you can see right here, we can see the create post buttons that is recently I created. And if I click on this create post, it made a API call. It was showing loader, but in real-time projects, basically we used to put a spinner, and it will create the records that I have specified, right? New post and new post body. And once it get the success callback, it retrieve the same created object, and I have added into the list of post, so that you can see. And the post title is new post and new post body. So this is a very simple example of adding a post, but in real time, most of the endpoints are secured. So it will not directly allow you to send the data to their API endpoint. So in that case, what we have to do, right? So most of the cases it's a secure endpoint, so they need a token in the header. So what exactly we have to do, right? So let's say it's expect a variant token. So variant tokens, we need to pass that with authentication header, and with that token encryption strings, that basically we used to fetch that authentication token much before we make this create request, and we'll pass that encrypted tokens with our header authorization. In server, they will accept that token, encrypted token basically, and decrypt it and will validate whether that is a valid token or not. If it is valid, they will send you the response. Otherwise, they will send you something unauthorized, and you will see in the cache log. So whenever you make a API call, basically if it is a successful call, then you will see 200 status code. That is what we saw in the Postman also, right? 200 series status code. It means created or successfully done, right? But sometimes we see 404 error code, or sometimes 500 error series like this. That basically, is there any problem in the internal API or any error came? I'll suggest you guys, please explore the Axios library. It has a lot of functions and different way that we can connect with the APIs. And API is something like we use very heavily day-to-day lives. And for this sessions, I'll stop here. Thank you. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment and share. Please subscribe my channel.